After 9/11, we heard something over and over again. There was a narrative. We heard from US and European officials that the status quo was untenable. And it was, in fact, untenable, as we've now found out. I think most people knew that the region was on the brink of a popular explosion of some kind, but we didn't know how and when it was going to happen. And this is the problem with autocracies. They seem stable until they're not, and then it's too late.
The protesters' stance is that they're going to keep coming back. They're going to keep the pressure up. But they are in some ways undermined by the weakness of the Egyptian opposition, which lacks leadership, has focus insofar as it is clear as to the demands, the immediate demands that it wants responded to by the government, but is in itself fractured. Even the Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood, faces challenges from within. There are some who feel they should not have met up with Omar Suleiman, that it has undermined their position on the street. And there are others that feel that, no, this was a chance for them, and they would also be sidelined. There is, of course, Mr. al-Baradei, who sent a representative who met with Omar Suleiman separately, who I think rightly says that the whole situation is fairly opaque. Suleiman is very connected to the government, and things are not clear. But my feeling was that Baradei, it's not that he lacks credibility, but he is not particularly popular, and particularly in an atmosphere that has been conjured up in Tahrir Square, he is not necessarily the kind of man, the populist president that people want to follow, given how high emotions are running.
And I was just, as recently as early December, I was in Egypt covering the elections, which were actually quite possibly the most rigged in Egyptian history. And I met with a number of opposition figures when I was there around that time, and demoralized would be the best word that I can think of to describe them. Resigned to their fate, demoralized. There was talk of mass protest and civil disobedience, but no one was very clear on how that would actually happen. So I think no matter what happens, the revolution might not succeed in Egypt. We don't know for sure. We don't know if Egypt's going to be a democracy in a week or two or in a year. But what I think we do know is that the Arab world can't go back to what it was on January 24th. Because Arabs know something they didn't know then, and that is that numbers matter, that putting people in the street can have an amazing impact. And the Egyptian regime was really thought to be one of the more unified and one of the more ruthless in the region. This wasn't a Ben Ali situation where, at the first sign of pressure, there would be panic and he'd be making his plans to go to Saudi Arabia. No one thought that of Mubarak and the people around him. So there was a sense that the Egyptian regime would not concede as much to its opponents. We've seen the end of stability. So that word, and I probably should put it in quotation marks, stability, it's over now. Stability is over. The idea that we could purchase stability at the cost of freedom. Because the stability of these regimes is no longer guaranteed anywhere. Yemen, Jordan, Algeria, there's no way to guarantee that these regimes will be in power in the same way they are now in 1 year. The next revolt doesn't have to come tomorrow, but the important point is that it could come tomorrow. And in this sense, each and every one of these pro-Western regimes is a liability to the Western powers.
I'm a little bit worried about how we're interpreting the United States' role. I read it somewhat differently. I think the pressure that's been put on Egypt by President Obama is quite enormous. I think that the military feel that pressure, and that the United States has played a very important role in the last 2 weeks. And its vision, I think, of Egypt and the Middle East and how it wants to project itself in the region, in a way was indicated as early on as Mr. Obama's speech in Cairo. What it wants to see is the peoples of the region, as he says, decide their destiny, and America will be there to support a democratic process. It knows that there's dangers to this, but it also came to learn very recently the extent to which Mr. Mubarak was a liability. So I don't think there is any turning back at this stage in terms of a desire for political reform in Egypt, and for the United States to a large extent backing that.
CIA sources have been claiming that al-Qaeda in Yemen now represents the biggest threat to national security in the United States, and there's a high fear of what might come next if the president loses control or if there is a transfer of power in 2013. I think there's enormous concern about stability and caution about anything that might be seen to disrupt stability. And in Yemen itself, I think there is also a very high-level fear of chaos, which the president has been playing on, but is present within Yemeni society itself.
If anything, I think what these protests have told us is that it's not only about economic conditions, but the urge in the Arab world is for political participation and accountability. And that's something we're going to see, I believe, a lot more of, even in countries like Saudi Arabia.